Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture on exam strategy, tips and tricks that can be applied for all AWS exams. So first thing to know is the question format, and every question starts with a background or context, and that talks about something about the application, infrastructure or the company information. Then comes the part where the objective or goal is mentioned, and that could be something like migration, optimization, high availability. It has to do something with what you want to achieve. And lastly, there is the constraints. And constraints could be like it should be most cost effective, it should be cheap, it should be more performant, fast, ease of use, minimal effort, something like no in-house expertise available or no developers available, etc. So, for example, scenario, a background context could be a financial services company runs a mission critical database application on premises using Oracle. The application processes thousands of transactions per second and requires 99.99% uptime. Their current hardware is approaching end of life and they need to move to AWS. And then there will be something like objective or goal, which could be something like migrate the Oracle database to AWS with minimal disruption while ensuring high availability and maintaining performance. And lastly, how constraint change the answer. So this is the important part. So let's say I will talk 3 examples of constraint. Constraint set A is something like budget is not a concern, 6-month timeline available, they have experienced DBA team, and there is a zero tolerance for data loss. So this is one set of constraint, and in this case the solution would be to use AWS database migration service with Oracle RDS, multi-easy deployment, potentially with read replicas for additional resilience. But let's say the constraint has changed to something like this: strict budget limitations, need migration completed in 1 month, no Oracle expertise in-house, can tolerate brief downtime. In this case, the solution will point towards something like use AWS application migration service to lift and shift the entire server as is to EC2 instance with future plan to modernize. So we are just trying to delay and buy time. And third set of constraint could be something like there is a moderate budget, 3 months timeline, strategic goal to reduce Oracle licensing cost, willing to refactor application. So in this case, the solution will be something like use AWS schema conversion tool to migrate from Oracle to Amazon Aurora, PostgreSQL with database migration service for data migration, saving on licensing cost long term. The exam will often present similar technical scenarios but vary the constraints to test your ability to select the most appropriate solution for the specific circumstances. And for the professional level exams, there will be something like there will be some distraction over here, like after the objective or goal or before this, there could be some unnecessary information just to waste some of your time. So just make sure you approach every question and identifying the constraints, what is the objective or the goal, and the background. So this is the order of importance. Next is the process of elimination. So use process of elimination to quickly identify and remove clearly incorrect answers. So we start with 100%, we go 50%, and finally we narrow down to 1. And this is the obvious one which we all use. Questions are either in 2 groups, group A and B, and you have to identify the right group first and narrow down to final answer by further eliminating. Similar options. So when 2 answer options are similar, one of them is likely the correct choice. So when you encounter 2 very similar answer options in the AWS exams, this pattern indicates that one of them is likely the correct answer. And here is why. The logic behind similar options. And this goes to something called as test creation pattern. Test creators often develop the correct answer first, then create variations of it as distractors. Similar answers usually indicate the test writer is focusing on subtle but important distinctions. Next, focus on keyword. Pay attention to keywords like high availability, scalability, or cost effective that hint at the solution. High availability keywords. So I'll give you some example. Highly available. Use multiple availability zones in the same region. Disaster recovery. Implement multi-region solutions. Some cost related keywords. Most cost effective. Then you look for the cheapest solution that meets requirement. Long-term storage, Consider archival solutions like Glacier or S3 infrequent access. Some performance related keywords, scalable, that involves solutions involving auto scaling or read replicas. Low latency keyword points to CloudFront, Elastic Cache, or DynamoDB Accelerator. Lastly, implementation specific keywords, configure with least or the less effort, and this points to managed AWS services. And if we talk about managed services keyword, this indicates reduced administration and operational overhead. So this is the table of average time per question and how many questions you should finish by 1 hour or the 2 hour mark. So first we have Cloud Practitioner and all the associate level exams which have 65 questions, and for this you have 90 minutes, 130 minutes and 180 minutes respectively. So average time per question you should spend ideally should be 1 minute 23 seconds. For associate it should be 2 minutes, and for the professional 2 minutes 24 seconds. And after 1 hour mark you should reach 43. In this case you should finish ideally 30 questions and here 25. And after the 2 hour mark this exam should get finished, and for professional 50 questions each you should finish by this time. And last, and if you have opted for English as second language for non-native English speakers, you have to do this one time where you get 30 minutes extra. So make sure you watch how to book the exam video. And once you do this, this time allocation will be given for each and every exam. So you make sure you do this one-time activity. In that case, you get extra 30 minutes. So the table will slightly change. Number of questions is same, but total time you have 120 minutes. Associate is 160 minutes, 210 minutes. Average time per question 1 minute 51 seconds. Here it's 2 minute 28 seconds, and here 2 minutes 48 seconds. After 1 hour mark, ideally you should finish 32. For associate 24 questions you should have finished, and 21 questions here. 2 hours you should finish all the practitioner. 49-50 questions should ideally finish by for associate, and 43 for professional. And because you still have some more time, 30 minutes after 3 hours, you should finish at least 64 questions by the 3 hour mark for the professional level. Okay, next is flag for you. So make sure you flag difficult questions and return to them later. And when you come to return to them later, there is 2 options. So every questions on the top right, there will be a button flag for you, and there will be flag symbol or the icon. If you are not sure, make sure you click that. And once you have finished, for example, all the 65 or 75 questions, you will be taken to a screen where there will be 2 buttons. Review all, or probably on the left side and right side, review flagged. So do not click review all, make sure you click review flagged, and that will just take you to the questions which you have marked for review later. So max time for the questions, never spend more than 3 to 4 minutes on a single question. So 3, maybe you will probably cross some time, but if you feel that you have spent too much time, just move on. Slight differences. So when 2 answers look similar, focus on slight differences. So pay close attention and watch for subtle differences in service names. For example, something like inspector versus guard duty. Deployment options, multi-AZ versus multi-region. Access methods, something like IAM role versus IAM user. And some more examples, for example, S3 standard versus S3 standard infrequent access. Application load balancer with sticky sessions versus application load balancers with cross-zone balancing. And quick strategy, identify the question's key requirement, read each answer word by word, and correct answer often hinges on a single term that perfectly matches the scenario. Next is AWS specific solutions. Look for AWS specific solutions rather than generic IT solutions. So I have a lot of examples for this. You choose Amazon RDS over standalone MySQL installation. Prefer Amazon CloudWatch over third-party monitoring solutions. Select AWS IAM over external identity providers. Use AWS Key Management Service for encryption rather than custom encryption solutions. Choose S3 over generic file storage systems. Select EFS Elastic File System for shared file systems instead of NFS Network File System. Use Amazon FSx instead of standalone Windows file servers, CloudWatch over Nagios or other monitoring solutions, AWS X-Ray over generic application performance monitoring solutions, CloudTrail over custom logging solutions, DynamoDB instead of standalone NoSQL databases, Amazon Aurora over standard MySQL, PostgreSQL, Amazon Elasticache instead of self-managed Redis, AWS Shield for DDoS protection, AWS WAF for web application firewall, AWS GuardDuty for threat detection. IAM is important and pay special attention to questions about IAM as they appear in all certifications. So focus on these key concepts. First is IAM role, which is a container permissions for authorized entities. Then we have trust policy, who can assume the role, permission policy, what the role can do. Then we have permission policies, and these define allowed actions on AWS services, specify accessible resources and operations. Then we have something like called principal, which is who, entity that assumes the role. It can be IAM users, AWS services, other AWS accounts, and applications. Then we have IAM flow, principal request role access, which gives trust policy, which provides the trust policy validation. Principal receives temporary credentials and principal becomes the role session. Then role session performs actions limited by the permission policies. So make sure you understand IAM very well, because that will help you almost crack 5 to 10 questions in almost all exams. So commonly confused services. So review the most commonly confused services, and examples are SNS versus SQS, EBS versus EFS versus S3, CloudWatch versus CloudTrail, auto scaling versus elastic load balancing, IAM roles versus IAM policies, RDS versus DynamoDB. So this is SQL, this is NoSQL. NAT gateway versus Internet gateway, VPC peering versus VPN versus Direct Connect, AWS Lambda versus AWS Fargate, and AWS Config versus AWS Systems Manager. So question type. So make sure you are familiar with the exam format. So it's usually 1 out of 4 you have to choose, 2 out of 5. So this will be a checkbox, it will be a radio, and this sometimes 3 out of 6, and 1 out of 4 is very obvious one, clear one, but sometimes 2 options together will make the right answer, or 3 options together will make the right answer. So in this case, when you have 2 or 3 combination, these 2 form some kind of a sequence or dependency. So sometimes 2 looks correct, but they don't form dependency, or the combination is not the right. So in this case, this is a bit tricky. You have to find the right combination. So A, B, C may look correct, but A and C would be correct because that dependency or the flow is formed based on that. So when you have to do guesswork, always choose the automated, perfect, ideal solutions over manual, cumbersome, error-prone, long-winded solution. So this is only applies when you are left with no choice and you have to just guess. Examples, let's say one option is install something on EC2, write some scripts and run them manually. So most of the time this would be incorrect, because AWS has worked very hard to make everything as automatic and seamless as possible. So guessing the ideal perfect solution will most likely get you the score. So when uncertain about an answer, you can prioritize automated AWS solutions. So I'll give few examples in each and every category. Let's say database. So instead of setting up MySQL on EC2 and writing backup scripts, you should choose Amazon RDS with automated backups and maintenance. Second example, for deployment, instead of manual deployment to EC2 with custom scripts, choose AWS Elastic Beanstalk or Code Deploy with automated rollbacks. Third example, scaling. Instead of writing scripts to monitor and launch EC2 instances, choose auto scaling groups with predefined scaling policies. Fourth example, data processing. Instead of custom ETL scripts on EC2 instances, choose AWS Glue for serverless data integration. Monitoring example. Instead of custom monitoring scripts with email alerts, choose CloudWatch with automated alerting through SNS, simple notification service. Okay, sit for the whole time. So sit for the whole time and try to remember and memorize the hard, difficult questions. Questions which were flagged for review are obviously the hard questions. You can read them again. So you are ensuring the chances of passing on the second attempt. In fact, I would encourage you to carry a pen and notebook to quickly jot down difficult questions or AWS services that came in the exam but you didn't know the answer. So after you finish exam, you can just try to memorize or try to recall at least 5 to 10 questions which you are quite sure that you did not get right, and those questions will automatically fall under the category which you have marked for the review, and that way at least you ensure that you are just making sure that second time you will most likely you will pass the exam. Okay, this is very personal. This is test center versus remotely proctored. So choose test center over remotely proctored. This is completely personal choice, but I usually prefer test center because the burden or the stress of setting up internet, making sure computer works, everything falls on the test center. Even in case something goes wrong, they will be notifying the AWS authority and they will be taking responsibility. But when you are at home, it's up to you. Internet connection may go down, so system may start pushing updates, anything can go wrong, and you are relieved from all this stress and you can focus or do much better in the exam. Okay, this is very personal. This is my strategy. I flag or mark as many questions for review later till around 50, 55 or 60% of the total number of questions, and that way I am able to warm up the brain, fill in any knowledge gaps. So these questions which I have flagged or marked, they will come later and I will make sure I don't have to go searching for it. But if I don't mark for review, I have to go through each and every question. And lastly, I can read and learn on the exam as I am giving the exam. So this strategy helps maximize exam performance by initially flagging 55-60 questions. And here is why it works. Because your brain needs time to adjust to exam conditions, and first 15 to 20 minutes are often less productive as you settle in. Even for my first 10 or 20 questions you will find most difficult. I don't know whether because you are warming up or they have intentionally put the first most difficult question in first 10 or 20. Then knowledge activation. As you progress through questions, related concepts will be triggered in your memory. Then you will have pattern recognition. You will begin noticing recurring themes and services that appear frequently. Fourth, there is a question cross-reference. Later questions often contain information that helps answer earlier ones. And for, let's say, professional, I will mark 40 to 45 questions out of 75. For associate, I will mark 35 to 40 out of 65. And specialty same, because same number of questions, 35 to 40 out of 75 to 40 out of 75. So slightly different because it's a different exam. And first pass, as I talked about, answer what you know confidently. Don't mark everything, but as soon as you are a bit unsure, flag. And don't spend more than 3 minutes, which I already talked about, 3 to 4 minutes. And during the review phase, you can review the flag questions. Now you have warmed up your brain and knowledge activated from seeing the full exam. It is easier to tell what is wrong, so sometimes it's easier to pinpoint what is wrong rather than what is right. So there is already elimination strategy which benefits this process, and spot obviously wrong answers instantly, and then you narrow to 4 to 5 down to 2 to 3, and this will save time on complex analysis. And some key red flags to watch out for. So these are the one this is a red flag. So basically you should not choose that option. So let's say cost. Overpriced solutions when cheaper options meet requirements. Reserved instances for short-term needs. Some architecture red flags. Single AV for high availability scenarios. Cross-region synchronous replication. Some red flag for security. IAM users, not roles for AWS services. Credentials in EC2 user data. Okay, reason for change. So during review phase, do not change unless you have a solid justification. And I'll come to point where when to change answers. So basically don't change during the review phase, but when to change answers and when not to change. First, when to change. Clear when you have a clear technical error in the original choice. Second, You have misread key requirements first time. Third, you found contradicting information in another question. Fourth, you have spotted AWS service limitations which you have missed earlier. Next, when not to change the answers. First one, you are just feeling unsure. Second guessing without any new information. Third, under time pressure which makes you anxious. Fourth, different answers looks better without any technical reason. And statistical reasoning, there is a first instinct rule. First answers are often correct. Research shows changing answers without justification reduces scores. And you should trust your initial preparation and knowledge. Okay, questions qualified for flagging for review are these ones. Complex scenario questions that involve multiple AWS services interacting together. Multiple choice questions where you need to select multiple correct answers like 3 out of 6 or 2 out of 5. Questions with similar looking answer options that require careful comparison. Questions involving calculations, something like cost, IOPS, throughput, and capacity. Questions where you understood the concept but need more time to analyze all options. Questions involving step-by-step architectural decisions. Questions where you need to compare multiple similar services like SNS versus SQS. Questions involving complex IAM scenarios or security configurations. Questions about disaster recovery or high availability that requires multiple components. Questions involving cost comparisons across different solution approaches. So no one knows it all, no one can know all of the answers, and you should aim to get the highest possible score based on what you know. So do not get stuck or hung up with a single question. For example, if there are 75 questions, then all questions must be treated with equal value. Even though there is some slight weightage difference between different questions, but for you, you should treat each and every question with equal value, and it would be silly to focus on one specific question just because you like or get attached with one question. Apply Amazon leadership principles like customer obsession and working backwards to determine the best answer. And these principles are cost optimization for customer benefit, enhanced security and compliance, improved reliability and performance, maximum business value, operational efficiency, future scalability, long-term value over short-term fixes, solutions that build customer trust, architectures that allow future growth, options that improve security and compliance. And learn from questions. Use questions to help answer other questions in the exam. So this goes back to again the review phase and why we are marking questions or flagging questions for review. So the exam itself is a valuable resource for answering difficult questions. And you can have information mining strategy, question cross-reference. Later questions frequently contain key information that solves earlier flagged questions, service details, scenario specifics in one question often reveals service capabilities or limitations applicable to other questions. Process of confirmation. Use consistent information across multiple questions to validate your understanding of a concept. And the practical approach here is to flag, as I talked about, uncertain questions during the first pass. Note which AWS appear in multiple questions. When reviewing flagged questions, recall related information from the entire exam. Look for contradictions between your answers and they signal potential misunderstandings. Service selection patterns. Managed services are often preferred over self-managed solutions. Serverless options are frequently correct for new implementations. Native AWS services are typically favored over third-party solutions like Datadog, PagerDuty, and others. So disclaimer, I have tried my best to recall and share as many tips as possible based on appearing for AWS exams 25 to 30 times, but you must use, adapt, improvise these as per your individual learning style and pace. Personal exams taking strategies, personal exams taking strengths and weaknesses, specific certification exam requirements, time management capabilities, technical background and experience, comfort level with different AWS services, and understanding of AWS concepts and architectures. And that's all. Thanks for watching.